Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is just a quick run through of the upcoming data analysis assignments that you will have coming due. We reviewed this in class, and also I'm just going to post this in the assignment section so that you have it to refer back to if any questions come up as you complete the assignments. As you know, that throughout the semester, you are going to be doing 3 different analytic exercises. Really, my hope is that what these exercises do is just give you more time to reflect on the different types of analysis that we're going to be practicing and learning in class. Each analytic exercise, you will decide which type of analysis you're going to choose based on the point in time that we are currently in the semester. So for the first analytic exercise, you will choose between first and second cycle coding or thematic analysis. These exercises have 4 different parts. The first is the analytic orientation, the second is the analytic process, third is analytic claims and evidence, and the fourth is the methodological reflection. So we're going to look deeper at both the analytical orientation and decisions. With the analytic orientation, this is what we have been doing throughout the semester and will continue to do each week when we look in depth at the different article examples. When we start to kind of pull apart, how do people describe the different orientations that they're using, and then how do they describe the decisions that they make. So this is the real purpose behind why we are doing this, so you can understand how people do this, what you think that they're missing, so you can start to think about how you might do it differently, to really think about how do you clearly describe the analytic choices that you make. The third part is what we would traditionally call a findings section. Because you're only going to be working with one interview guide or one interview transcript at a time, we really can't get to the level of findings. So we're just going to call these analytic claims, what it is that you are finding through the analysis that you're doing. And then the final is the reflection on your process throughout. Okay, so with the analytic orientation, this is where you're going to dive in and tell the reader what approach you're using. So you want to describe the analytic tradition, giving appropriate citations, and then tell us the research question that's guiding your analysis. You want to be sure that you're using qualitative, appropriate language. So what does that mean? That means that you're using first-person language. In this analysis, I used the research question guiding my analysis. So this means you're not using third person anthropomorphized language like the analysis found, the researcher did. Remember, you always want to identify that is you doing the research. You also don't want to call your work a methodology if it's not. So if you're doing thematic analysis, you're doing thematic analysis. You're not doing a narrative inquiry using thematic analysis. You're doing an interview study at this point using thematic analysis. Same with first and second cycle coding. And then when we get to later methodological types of analyses, we might be having a different discussion. So in this example right here, I'm talking about using constant comparative analysis, which is the grounded theory analytic approach. And you can see I'm not calling it a grounded theory analysis. Also in this section, you want to talk about the different key features of the approach, as well as why this approach was appropriate for the research question itself. And so with this, you want to go through and you want to talk about all of the things that would be important for a reader to know about what the specifics of this analytic method are. So that's really the easy part. This is when we start getting to the more difficult part and where we've been really digging down within these research papers that we've been reading. This is where we start to describe what it is that we do in our work. And I don't want you to just talk about, I don't want you to make things up if you haven't done them. So you can see in this example, I had written about theoretical coding in the first part as being part of a constant comparative analysis, but I didn't engage in theoretical coding. It wouldn't be possible in the stage of analysis that I'm in. So I say that. I say I did not engage in theoretical coding. Just like if you were to talk about doing thematic analysis, you wouldn't be able to get to levels 5 and 6 at this stage in your research. So you don't want to say that you did that part of the analysis at this point. So you do want to, though, go through, talk about what it is that you did, tell us how you did it. You want to give examples. So give me examples of your data and how that links to different codes. Then walk us through each stage of the analysis. In the syllabus, it says include examples of your analytic process. So that could be different excerpts of coding, memos, any kind of diagrams, anything that you think could help us understand how you did your process. So in this one, you can see that I say see figure 1 to see how I clustered my codes and my focus coding. And so here is a not very useful example, but this would be an example of how I clustered codes during my focus coding moment. So let's say that you're hand coding everything. That means you can just take a picture, upload it, and then cut and paste and put it into your document. I continue to go on with my analytic decisions. So also in constant comparative analysis, writing memos is really important. And so in here, I talk about what are some of the questions that I was writing down when I was memoing. And then I talk about my later memos where I start really coming to find or think about my analytic claims. So this is where I talk about when do I move from coding into thinking about what we might think of theming or coming to my conclusions. And so here I give another example of my analytic process in figure 2, which is a bigger memo. So for analytic claims, you have a couple of different choices. You can use a narrative or table style to depict your claim. So when we think about an analytic claim, I just want to reiterate, this is typically what we might call our findings, our theories, our categories. These are the patterns that we're seeing as we're doing our analytic work. And this is really our interpretive engagement with the research questions. This is what it is through our analysis process. This is what it is that we're coming to understand within our data to answer our research question. So when we are going to present our analytic claims, regardless of if we're using a narrative or table style, we want to structure this as we would in a manuscript. So we're going to have an opening, then we're going to have that meat of our claim, so that could be the narrative or table style, and then we want a closing, which is where we link the claims together. And this is an example of an opening. Now, obviously, I don't want you to write in bullet points. I just bullet pointed this in class so that would be easier to see. But you would want to write something like from the analysis and give your participant a pseudonym. I developed and tell me how many analytic claims I'm going to see and what do these analytic claims tell us about your research question. So you're always connecting back to your research question and you're always kind of giving me the narrative arc about how it answers that research question. And then you give me a roadmap to what's coming next. So in the following section, I present each claim and do, and tell me what's next. And then you tell me how it's going to be presented and then what follows that presentation. And on this slide, you can just see an example of what an analytic claim written in the narrative approach would be. You can see this isn't very long. It's not like a traditional long theme. I'm not looking for a ton of work. It's a couple of hundred words. This is almost like what I would expect to see in a very well-developed code. So ultimately, what I'm hoping to see is about 3 really well-developed codes that you have created from your analysis that could have some links to quotes, quotes within your data. And then on this slide, you can see what an analytic table would look like. You can see on the left-hand side the analytic claim, the definition that follows that claim, the different codes that would contribute to that claim, the code definitions, and then some data that supports those different codes. So it's almost the same exact thing. One just is filled out a bit more, and then one is a bit more visual. And then finally, as I mentioned, regardless of if you use the narrative or the table style approach, you always want to end your analytic claims section by connecting everything together. So you don't want to just provide analytic claims just like you wouldn't want to just provide themes. You have to tell the reader, how do these things work together? If they don't work together, then typically they aren't probably answering your research question. And so this is just how you would finish off your section. And it doesn't need to be typically quite long, but you just sort of want to finish out that story for the reader. I mentioned this in class, and we'll talk about it in the writing workshop if we haven't already, but you don't want to write your analytic claims in this way. First of all, I'm seeing more and more of this when I'm reviewing journals. This is something that's happening a lot with AI-assisted analysis. AI is really insistent on putting the data and the different quotes that folks use in these bullet-pointed, list-wise fashion. And it doesn't really help a reader understand the narrative arc of a theme. And so don't do this, just don't. And we'll talk about how you write your quotes into your themes in the writing workshop. But I do just want to say this, it's a pet peeve of mine. And then finally, as always with most of my assignments, you will just end this paper with a brief methodological reflection about what it was like doing this analytic method, what worked for you, what didn't, what it helped you to see, what was hard for you to see, and what it was you learned about analysis through the process. And that is it for this analytic process practice assignment. I will post the example of the constant comparative analysis in the assignment so that you can have just a thing to look at as you're working. Otherwise, I will see you in class.